Robinson heaving one down the sideline, and he's got Cass over the top. Takes it down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing the podcast. We are brought to you guys today by our advertisers. Our advertisers are Bell to Bell Fitness, Shea Tor, a realtor out in Arizona, former Bruin alum, and my main man, Howard Chang, a realtor right here in Los Angeles. Let's go through them, guys. Bell to Bell Fitness is a boxing gym on the West Coast used by their FIT acronym, Fight Inspired Training. My main man, Tony Gonzalez, was the boxing coach for UCLA for over 10 years. He has built this gym on the West Side to learn how to boxing, stay in shape, and get you all the essentials you need to become somebody that is obsessed with boxing and fitness. Make sure to check it out. Go into Bell to Bell Fitness and say you heard about it from the Bruin Bible, and you're going to get a free session with Tony Gonzalez. So make sure to check that out. Shea Tor, my main man. Shea Tor is a licensed real estate agent in Arizona and a lifelong Bruin. He's a current Wooden Athletic Fund donor and football season ticket holder. When not selling houses or going to UCLA games, he loves to travel the country, checking out different arenas, ballparks, and stadiums. If you're looking to make the move to Arizona or know someone who is, please reach out to our loyal friend, Mr. Shea Tor. His phone number is 602-487-3975. Once again, his number is 602-487-3975. Make sure to check that out. And then the local realtor we got out here, Howard Chang. Howard Chang is a local realtor with the Serene team at eXp Realty. Their team has an office right here in Culver City, though they help clients buy and sell homes all over the LA County and the surrounding areas. Howard and his team do a ton of business and are super in tune with the market, knowing winning strategies to give their clients a competitive advantage, have amazing vendor referrals, are a one-stop shop for anything real estate, and just provide a ton of value for their clients. Howard and his partner, Kyle Draper, are UCLA alums and a huge fans of the UCLA football and basketball programs. You will often see them at games, tailgating and networking, and staying involved with the UCLA alumni community. They would love to help any fellow alumni with accomplishing their real estate goals. So if you guys have any real estate needs in the LA area, look no further. Howard is your guy. All right, guys, we're going to go into the episode. Wayne Cook here today. Make sure to check it out. What is up, and welcome out to another edition of the LA Football Network show here on 1090 ESPN The Mightier, brought to you by Athletic Greens and Bet Online. Will Decker in the house, joined by my main man, the madman in the house. Brother, how are we doing on this Friday? It's summertime in Southern California. I mean, there's nothing better than being right here, going to the beach, hanging out, having great weather in LA, brother.
No doubt about it, Thriller. We got the beach, we got LA, we got the weekend, we got each other, and most importantly, we got the Bruins, and we get a chance to talk about our beloved Bruins.
Man, nothing better than talking UCLA football with my guy. We broke down the wide receiver room last week, and lo and behold, we decided it was time to move on to the tight ends. A lot of guys in this room, a lot of unknowns, a lot of potential guys I expect to break out in certain situations. But I think where we got to start this off on the top, man, the unfortunate news of Hudson Habermehl and that ACL injury. I felt like this guy was on the brink of breaking out this year on a lot of regards. 6'7", 250-pound tight end. He's, equally good at blocking as he is a receiving threat in the tight end room. And I know he only has 24 catches, but we've seen those flashes, man. 5 career touchdown catches on those 24. We saw him with the shades on the sideline. He's a personality the fans love. Habermehl was doing a lot of great things for UCLA when he was out there in the football field. And it just really hurts that he was able, to get hurt in this spring practice, man. So talk to me about Habermehl and how big of a loss this is for the UCLA football program moving forward in 2024.
Well, it's a really significant one, and we're heartbroken for him for 2024, and hopefully he makes a complete 100% recovery, which I'm sure he will. All our thoughts and prayers are out to Hudson. I know he had a very successful surgery right at the end of summer here just a couple of weeks ago. And I think what makes it a little tragic, Will, for 2024 is when you talk about all of the ingredients of his game, when you talk about the athleticism, when you talk about the hands, when you talk about the versatility, being able to be a receiver as well as a blocker, you talk about the wingspan, you talk about his ability to get open, and then you talk about his personality with the shades you mentioned in that great game a couple of years ago against Washington in the Rose Bowl. Who does he remind you of a little bit from an ingredient standpoint? It's Travis Kelce. I mean, and the fact that we had Eric Bieniemy here in year one, obviously with a PhD, a doctorate in being able to get tremendous output from, all world tight ends that sort of have a similar skill set. The possibilities here are endless. Now, obviously, there's a long, long, long way to go for Hudson Habermehl to be a Travis Kelce, but those ingredients were there. And with the same coach, I'm sure he was thinking about Hudson in putting him in situations, putting him in matchups where you saw Travis Kelce really do great things for Kansas City year over year. So we have to wait on that now a year, and hopefully we'll get to see that in 2025. But I think there's sort of a missed opportunity, particularly, Will, for this offense, because I think the rest of the guys we're going to talk about, we're all very high on, but I don't know if they have the collection of skills in one guy that Hudson Habermehl had. And when you talk about having weaponry, we've talked last week about the wide receivers and everything that they bring to the table, and then you throw in a guy like a Keegan Jones in the backfield, and then you throw in a guy like Habermehl. I mean, the versatility from an aerial perspective at all levels of the field, you're talking about putting significant strain on a defense and really being able to find that matchup by default that you can exploit play over play and possession over possession. So big loss here, Will, and I think we're going to have to replace Hudson by committee. And I think that's where we're sort of excited where the rest of this roster is, because I think guys do certain things really, really well. And I think it's going to take an approach tight end by committee to do what our man Double H can do.
Yeah, it's such a bummer on so many levels. You felt his time was coming at the tight end position. He had waited a long time, was a walk-on. UCLA's had a lot of success, in the past few years with some of their guys. And he was kind of one of those last guys from that Chip Kelly tight end room that really made an impact on the field, whether it was a Caleb Wilson, whether it was a Devin Asiasi, whether it was a Greg Dulcich. I mean, we can even go back to the mid-2000s, talk about Mercedes Lewis, who's still playing in the NFL at his age, just a freak of nature at the position. We have Charles Arbuckle on the show. In a lot of ways, UCLA for the West Coast, we've had a lot of consistent tight ends. We've kind of sneakily put out there the tight end U. Who is your favorite tight end of those bunch before we dive into the players that we're going to be talking about for this upcoming year?
Oh, well, I got to go with Mercedes, and just everything that he brought to the table. Will, that 05 team to me was one of my favorite teams of all time. I mean, there were 4 fourth quarter double-digit comebacks. That team was sort of a Cinderella team. Started obviously 8-0, went all the way to number 6 in the country. I mean, there were sort of dreams of a potential national championship. And my God, I mean, LA was just on fire that year, Will, because think about it. You had Drew Olson, MJD, and Mercedes Lewis on one side. And then across town, you had the Leinert and Bush and Lendale White. I mean, and it was headed to sort of this world where they were both going to be undefeated in the crosstown game. I loved Mercedes so much because his hands were so soft. He was the ultimate red zone touchdown target, but he was also ahead of his time, Will. He was sort of a revolutionary specimen because in those days, UCLA even lined him up out wide. I mean, he was sort of this hybrid wide receiver, tight end. He had the agility to play both positions. And then, of course, he was a phenomenal blocker with the frame that he had. I mean, he could totally do it all. Really, to me, the archetype upon which all other UCLA tight ends since have been measured. So Mercedes is my guy.
Mercedes is your guy. You know who my guy is on that list. Greg Dulcich. I mean, when we started this podcast, was my freaking guy. Because, I mean, I have my favorites here. I'm never going to lie. There's been favorites I've had at UCLA when we've covered him. Charbonnet, maybe number 1 for me, just over the years of what he was able to do. Dulcich was right there. That first year, man, that LSU game when he had that like 65-yard gain on that, had the touchdown in the red zone to kind of seal the game, tore it up against USC in those big moments. Dulcich was just a stud. And I mean, if he can get healthy, man, with the Denver Broncos, I think, with Sean Payton trying to get Bo Nix in there, what a better security option for Bo Nix than, Greg Dulcich, man. This guy's the freaking stud. I love me some Dulcich. Caleb Wilson was a Mackey Award winner too, so you got to throw him in there as well. So many good tight ends. Hopefully this room can live up to some of that. And the guy we got to start with, Moliki Matavao. Sneaky explosive, man, I think is what I would say after revisiting his last year. 14 catches, 283 yards, 2 touchdowns. Man, that's over 20 yards a catch last year on what he was able to bring. Had the big touchdown against Colorado, made – 3 catches for 76 yards, in a big game against Washington State. When his number was called, he repeatedly delivered for UCLA on the offensive end. The problem with him is stats don't really paint the entire picture because that receiving room, as we talked about, is so deep. When we just broke down the wide receivers last week, if he can come anywhere close to that this year, 20 yards a catch, couple touchdowns, I think it's a very successful year for Matavao. Big dude can also block out there. Not afraid of the Big Ten. I mean, dude, when he was at Oregon before he transferred down here, he scored a touchdown that game against Ohio State at the Horseshoe when Oregon upset them in 2021. Talk to me about Matavao because, yes, we lost Habermehl, but we also have another tight end, 1A, 1B type of scenario with him coming back.
Yeah, Will, I'm really excited about Matavao, and I'm really excited about him again in this Eric Bieniemy system, particularly in the Big Ten, because where Matavao was able to get the 20 yards per catch, to your point, Will, was really very specifically in the play action. And, lining him up, obviously, in that tight end slot, close to the line of scrimmage, everything looked like a block, and so Matavao was really set up to block, and then he'd do that late release. And he'd usually do that late release on the opposite side of the field of where the quarterback was rolling to, and it really created a ton of space in that first and second level of the defense on the weak side. And so for me, Matavao, it's that classic play action tight end where his primary skill set to me still, Will, is just his ability as a blocker. I think he's absolutely elite, and that's going to come in huge spades and pay huge dividends, particularly in the Big Ten, particularly in the road, particularly in the red zone, third down and short, fourth down and short type of situations. And then you can vary off of that. You can counter off of that with him kind of setting up as the blocker, holding his block, and then releasing. And releasing then with some sort of horizontal variation with the route tree. So that to me is going to be really critical. And Will, I think what's going to be fascinating to me this season, I think we're going to see a parallel with Matavao's big games and J. Mike's big games, because I think both of those guys are going to be really dependent on play action and time, and plays kind of developing over a longer period of time. And where you can sort of exploit it underneath, you got to love your chances of being able to exploit it deep. So I see this as kind of a duo, a kind of a hidden duo, where when Matavao has a big game, I think J. Mike's going to have a big game because of how you're sort of setting it up off of that play action. But I'm very excited about Matavao because, you give that healthy dose of TJ Harden in between the tackles, you vary off of it with Keegan Jones, and then boom, you go play action with Matavao. Just totally opens up the field. I'm very excited. I think that 2 touchdowns is going to go way up. I like him at around 5 or 6 this year. And I think the 14 catches, I think goes way up. I think north of 25.
Man, and he's so elite on those delayed routes where it's play action, he's blocking, then he just kind of slips out into his route. He always takes the defense by surprise in those moments. I think Habermehl was a slightly better route runner, but I think Matavao may have some of the best hands on the team for a lot of regards. He's a great blocker too. So screams tight end number 1. It's great to have depth at this position. And, speaking of depth, this is up there with one of the biggest transfers, in my opinion, for this year. Outside of your Makahelis and Ruben Unijes on the offensive line, Bryce Pierre coming from Arizona State, especially after, a Habermehl goes down, a guy that's played a lot of football. You need to bring in a guy that's played some football in his own right. You bring Bryce Pierre. Yes, I know he's a senior, but he played a lot for, Arizona State last year, 17 catches, 139 yards. Bigger kid, 253 pounds, 6'5". And what I like about him is his most productive games last year, Madman, from a catches standpoint, one against number 5 Washington at that time, and then number 2 against number 6 Oregon at that time. So his best games came at the biggest moments. You get a guy that can come in and play right away, especially with that injury, plaguing UCLA's tight end room. Talk to me about Bryce Pierre, because I think this was a home run get for UCLA, especially with all that stuff going down.
Home run get, Will. And for those of us who are familiar, I mean, he sort of lined up at quarterback in that Arizona State game against UCLA last season, so there's a tremendous amount of versatility. He's had memorable games at tight end, but then also some infamous games at quarterback if you're a UCLA fan. I mean, particularly last year. So I really love what I see from Bryce Pierre, Will. I mean, I think you said it best, the frame. I mean, when you talk about 6'7", I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with that frame. He's got a lot of agility. He's got really nice hands, a lot of different things you can do. I think what's going to be fascinating is, can you imagine in power-heavy type of formations where you get Pierre and Matavao kind of lined up on the same side of the field? And, now you sort of open up, where are you going to kind of go stretch play with Harden? Are you going to maybe slip Keegan Jones out in the flat on the weak side? Or are you going to run kind of a duo type of situation with Matavao and Pierre to kind of get open? I think there's a sneaky, powerful formation there, Will, when you bring both of those guys on the field. You go 2 tight ends, and then you stack them on the same side of the field. I think it opens up an absolute world of possibilities. And then, Will, I think you got to love his versatility in the sense of, this is still Eric Bieniemy at the end of the day. He loves, from that Andy Reid coaching standpoint, he loves those trick plays and those sort of non-traditional plays. And you can really see Bryce Pierre kind of play a role in that, whether it's, being on the receiving end of some shovel passes, or maybe being on, being part of potentially a double reverse or a throwback to the quarterback. I think there's going to be 5 or 6 kind of gadget plays with Pierre that you can sort of use, given just the versatility of his skill set. And I think that's going to be a way to get him on the field, particularly when you've got Matavao as tight end 1 and then that litany of wide receivers. This could be a very nice way to kind of get him on the field and make an impact.
Yeah, and for me personally, I see where Pierre is going to be an absolute threat. Red zone. I mean, we're talking about with Mercedes Lewis. He's got a quicker, more athletic, type of style than Matavao.
Yep.
In those breaks and those small windows, I think Pierre is really going to be a threat for UCLA in those red zone scenarios. So really pumped. Bryce Pierre
it's that back, back of the end zone, Will, back sideline where, you're matched up on a linebacker. Linebacker's not really looking at the ball, and you're able to sort of be able to catch a great ball with your hands, in a tight window, to your point, not needing play action, not needing sort of anything schematically from a separation standpoint. It's like, Pierre, go get open back of the end zone and make a play for me. Totally agree with you. I think there's going to be a lot there to like, particularly in those situations.
Yeah, Pierre, I mean, the red zone is yours, buddy. Take the freaking torch. You're going to love it. Our guy, the next guy we got up, is a guy that I thought would be contributing a little earlier, but maybe this Habermehl injury, very negative on the surface. Maybe we can get a silver lining out of this. Jack Peterson, redshirt sophomore coming into this year. It's easy to forget how highly touted of a tight end this guy was coming to UCLA. Former 4-star. Looked at the offer sheet, Madman. Oregon, a team that's going to be competing for the national championship this year. USC, anytime we can take a player away from that school on the other side of Los Angeles, it's always a W. Florida State, Arkansas, 4-star talent at the tight end room. Jack Peterson, I think he's going to be used more as an H-back, but Peterson has the most frame similar in size, in speed, in weight to what Travis Kelce does, and that's Bieniemy's guy, right? So I think if I'm Bieniemy, that's the guy I'm coaching up the hardest for my old tight end, showing him what Kelce did, showing the route running. He has yet to really get on the field, but Peterson, we saw him in camp, made some nice plays, caught a couple touchdowns on those red zone drills. His time may be coming sooner than we think this year, and maybe Peterson, gets on the field and makes some big-time plays. What do we think about Jack Peterson at the tight end position for UCLA.
I love Jack Peterson, Will, and I think you nailed it there in terms of, how the enemy may be thinking about him today as well as moving forward. I love his ball skills, and I'll be honest with you, I think the guy that, this sort of opens the door for is Peterson, but I think where he learned a lot last year, Will, I'll be honest with you, is watching Carson Ryan. And we saw Carson Ryan's ball skills really come to fruition, not only in spring ball, but over the course of the season, particularly in that game against Utah, other games as well. Peterson has those types of ball skills, but with a very different frame, right? With more of a Kelsey-like frame. So I think particularly, we saw him this spring kind of down the sideline, making some really nice plays, being able to adjust his body in the air and be able to sort of come back on some balls that were intentionally underthrown. His ability to kind of twist his hips and be able to sort of be back shoulder on either side. I'm just very impressed with his ball skills for somebody of his frame. And I think that's going to be sort of fascinating to see how that shakes out and where he's going to sort of thrive in this offense. And I think there's probably a world here where a guy like Peterson matches up potentially even with a Loya and a Flores, guys who are more kind of underneath receivers. And then Peterson has more of that second level to operate middle of the field with those seam routes, given his ball skills. And then maybe Matavao is a guy, to our earlier point, you match up with J-Mike. So I think there's a really nice kind of combination. You almost think about it as hockey line changes here for UCLA this year of which receivers go with which tight end in terms of particular situation. But I really love what I see out of Peterson, particularly with the ball skills.
Yeah, Peterson has got his shot this year to really make a name for himself. I'm excited for him. He's got a lot of talent. This could be the offense that puts him over the top at UCLA. Michael Church, another guy on the roster, it feels like he's been here for a while. He's primarily like a blocking tight end in this system. So, I think that's kind of his role. He may grab a couple balls, may get out there, make some touchdown grabs in the red zone, but I think that's pretty much his role. I kind of want to close it on this. Carson Ryan, you alluded to it, man. Huge loss on the surface. That guy made some serious catches. I thought he was going to be the next one there. Do any of these guys have that ceiling of Carson Ryan from Matavao, Bryce Pierre, and our guy Jack Peterson?
Yeah, Will, it's a great question. I mean, Matavao, I think, is the best blocker of the group. And then I think everything sort of varies off of his blocking ability. I think Pierre has the best versatility of the group, but I don't know if necessarily Pierre does anything elite. He does a lot of things really well. Peterson, to me, Will, to be honest with you, if someone is going to get close to sort of that Carson Ryan level and that lineage of NFL prospects at the tight end position, that lineage of the Mackey Award winners, to me, it's Peterson. I mean, and so the question now is, how big of a jump can he make in 1 year? Or are we kind of looking at this as more of, hey, this is going to be kind of an intermediate jump in 24, and then we're going to see the finished product in 25. I think that's what's going to be really fascinating here. But to me, it's just really hard, Will, at the NFL level, and at the college level, to be able to have an athlete, a true athlete at the tight end position that can really threaten so many things from a receiving perspective, but then also be a guy that you can sort of line up in the trenches. Peterson, to me, has those skills. It's all very raw right now, so he's got to really sort of put it together in game situations. But I do think he has the highest ceiling of the guys on the field this year. And I think it's actually going to be kind of fascinating, Will, to see kind of a Habermehl Peterson tight end one battle next year, because I think those are the two guys to me that have the greatest upside to really battle. And that's going to be really fun to watch. Not wanting to get too ahead of ourselves, but outside of that quarterback battle in the spring next year, that tight end battle, Will, I think is going to be a ton of fun.
We got Noah Flores and Dylan Sims coming too in that recruiting class. It's going to be a lot of fun with that tight end room. Madman, it is Friday. Get home and enjoy yourself. Our listeners out there, get home and enjoy yourselves. It is the weekend. We love you guys. Fours up as always. The Bruin segment of the LA Football Show is over. Have a good one, guys.